Okay, so there are three reasons people become a teacher usually. First, they either know someone who was a teacher or they had a bad teacher and they want to change how people see whatever subject it is that they like. And the last one is they had a wonderful teacher who spoke life into them and gave them an opportunity to become the best next version of themselves in that subject. Okay, so how did I start speaking Spanish? About 20 years ago, I had an amazing teacher who, well, I didn't know it at first. I didn't know she was as amazing as she was. I went to sleep every day in her class because I didn't feel safe enough to sleep at home every night. So by the time I got to school, I was exhausted and I didn't know what she was saying. So I slept in her class every day. But one day she started playing Celia Cruz's music. And I just was like, okay, I didn't know people who looked like me spoke Spanish. I thought that was cool. And then I, after that day or so, or whatever lesson or so, I went to sleep in class every day still. But I would wake up. This was the system. I would wake up or I would be awake when we got into class. She would ask questions. I would participate, get my participation points, and give everyone else a chance to answer questions while I took my naps. So that was about 20 years ago. At the end of the second year of me being in her class, she told me that I was really good at Spanish and that she really wanted me to attend this competition. I went to the competition because if someone says you're good at something and you should go to the competition, you're more likely to go because you think you're good at it, right? You want to see at least how good you think you are, right? So I went to the competition, and when I was there, I found out that only two people from each school could come. I was one of two people from the whole school who could come. I did great at that competition. And I went on in the next 5 years to get the highest awards for 10 of, yeah, 10 competitions. And it was fun. I really enjoyed it. I'm a very competitive person. I don't know if you are, right? So I got the top awards for those. And while I was in the classes, I wasn't even paying attention. I was sleeping most of those classes. When I was awake and she would say stuff, I would be like, all right, it sounds like she's saying this in English. So when she says this is what she's expecting for us to respond with. And that's how I took my notes. I wrote them in English phonetically of what it sounded like she was saying in Spanish. So my pronunciation, yes, was pronouncing it like I would in English, but I was speaking Spanish. I don't know how to explain it other than that. So she was an amazing teacher and told me that I was good at something. And that's not why I became a teacher. I didn't want to be a teacher still. So, how did I become a Spanish teacher, a foreign language youth instructor? How did I do that? I started speaking Spanish the 20 years ago when she did that after she told me I was good at it. I didn't confidently speak Spanish before that. So after the competitions, I after the first competition, I applied to the International Baccalaureate program, which was for the high school in my area. And it had kids from all of the districts in our area who had different backgrounds culturally. It was international baccalaureate. So it was like the brightest of the brightest. It was higher than AP, it was higher than honors classes. And you had to commit to the whole program for 4 years mentally. Okay. Not everyone got in. We had interview progress. There was rigorous tests that we had to take. We had to do well on the tests we've already took with the standardized testing. I remember the ITBS and the CRCTs. I don't even think they're even doing those anymore. I think they have new names now. But I did really good with all of that and I got into the program. So since I got in, I was like, well, they have options for me to learn French or history more, or what was the other? Art. I wasn't good at art. I definitely didn't want to learn more about history. I Some people who look like me do and they love that, but my history courses showed me that it didn't work out very well for us. So it was just really depressing for me to do history in general for coursework. So I was like, well, I'm good at Spanish. I might as well try French. So I tried French. So while I was adding my third language of French that same year, I was like, you know what? I might as well start learning American Sign Language. So I decided to start learning American Sign Language on the weekends, no school days, on the weekends. I was in the sign language club, but on the weekends, I was taking actual ASL lessons. And those were an amazing experience. It showed me to the perspective of deaf people being very similar to my perspective of feeling bullied and alone and depressed. And at that point, when in my teenage years, I felt like life wasn't worth living if it was like that. If I had to feel so sad and stressed out all this time and alone, then maybe it wasn't life wasn't cut out for me. I'm so glad I didn't give up when I wanted to back then. I'm so glad God didn't let those attempts be the final answer. But moving on, I started speaking Spanish really good. Then I started taking French, started taking sign language classes, and those weren't what made me want to be a teacher. The question I'm answering is, how did I become a foreign language teacher? And since I gave French another chance and I gave sign language a chance, French, I took it in elementary school, but I don't think I was really good at it. My mom says that I was the translator for a conversation when I was like 5 years old. And when we went to Disney and someone spoke French, but they needed help with the cashier. And I was the person in the middle, the interpreter for that conversation. So I didn't know, I couldn't remember any of the French. I don't even remember this happening. My mom told me that it happened. So if my mom told me, then it happened. Anyways, um, so second time around with French, I'm doing really great with it. My French teacher also spoke Spanish, and I was like, oh, dope. And I thought it was cool that you could learn more. So then that made me want to keep learning. And then he did what he wasn't supposed to do. He taught us how to cuss real good in French. Oh my gosh. I'm not gonna say it. I'm not gonna say it because I do know some stuff. But I loved learning from him and from my Spanish teachers at that time. The only classes I really loved going to were the foreign language classes, and I was good at it. So why not? So I started learning sign language on the weekends, going to the deaf socials. And the deaf socials I was going to were at that time when I was in high school, they were all Black deaf socials. Yeah, there were a few white deaf people that were showing up to those events, but it was like a cookout, but in sign language. Man, I learned some dances. That's when I was like, oh, shoot, deaf people be dancing? Cool. So then I learned some dances because I was like, well, if they can learn, why can't I try? So I don't care about embarrassing myself anymore. Like I'm at the point where I've taken enough foreign language classes, I've had enough experiences of speaking foreign languages in person and learning in those conversations with natives to say, I don't care. I am confidently wrong when I'm wrong. I don't care. Because if I'm confidently wrong, then that gives me the ability to feel embarrassed when I make that mistake. And there's one mistake I made in sign language, and there's a sign I won't sign because of that mistake. But I learned from it. And that was the reason I'm like, okay, well, since I messed up really big with this, I'll do it again. I don't care. I'll mess up again, but I want to learn from natives in those conversations. But I can only have access to this by having a strong foundation in the language that I'm learning. So no, this isn't what helped me to decide to become a teacher. I just was like, okay, this helped me personally with my foreign language multilingual journey. So after I made that sign and I embarrassed myself, no, it was I was trying to sign something that was like next level, but it was like I messed it up and then it became very inappropriate. So the deaf people I was having a conversation with, I could see it on their face that I messed up. And I was like, oh, what did I sign? And they told me, and I was like, oh. I was like, well, if Black people could blush, I was red all over, right? So I was telling you how I went to the deaf socials. They made me feel like I was a part of a community, even though I wasn't deaf. I didn't feel alone anymore. So I enjoyed the socials. I went to every single one that I could go. And I decided in high school, you know what? I'm going to be a trilingual interpreter for the deaf. English, Spanish, and American Sign Language. Because at my first job was Six Flags, right? Six Flags over Georgia. I used Spanish every single weekend. Every day that I worked, I spoke Spanish. And I got paid to do it. Yes, it was minimum wage, but I was a professional Spanish speaker if I'm getting paid to speak Spanish, right? And then I got comfortable with Spanish. I was like, you know what? Every time I see someone using sign language, I'm going to jump in their conversation. Loved it. I loved Deaf Day at Six Flags. There were days when people would come to me and sign just to have a conversation. They weren't there to buy stuff. They would just come to hang out with me. And then what on Deaf Day of one of the years that I worked there, the people in my department, I was in the culinary department. And so the people who were the supervisors realized that I was getting all these guest compliments because I was speaking Spanish and French and sign language and or using sign language. And they came to me that day and they were like, you're not going to be in your stand today. You're going to go all the way around the park and help deaf people get the food that they're trying to order because we don't have anyone else in our department who can do what you can do. And I was like, oh, yeah, let's do this. They ain't pay me extra for it, but I got paid extra for it, if that makes sense. I was on assignment. So I'm on assignment in there interpreting for these deaf people and the Spanish speakers in the same day. And then I got to speak French in the same day. Oh my gosh, that's what I call a perfect day. A perfect day was being able to use all my current languages in the same day and making people feel comfortable with me, even though I might not feel comfortable when I go into a new setting because people don't look like me. But as soon as I get to connect with someone who uses one of my languages, it makes me feel like we have an instant community. It's like showing up to Invest Fest when I went and being around a whole bunch of people who look like me, who want financial freedom for their families, who want to be the first person to set up generational wealth for their families. So it was like I found my community. I showed up to a family reunion that wasn't my family. And I became a part of something with people who were strangers when we arrived, but now we're really close friends. We've built relationships. We've had good conversation, and we left with the intention of making the world more multilingual so we can break down these communication barriers and actually change the world. This isn't what helped me to decide to become a teacher. That's just what helped me to decide to keep learning more languages. Although right now I am only at the 4 languages, I aim to earn 36 more languages in the next 10 years. I want to get to 40 languages before I turn 40. Why not? Why not? Imagine the amount of impact I can have on the world if I decide to connect with them in their language on their level so we can actually make lateral changes that have a bigger impact internationally. So that was why I decided to keep going with the Spanish and sign language and French. My experience at Six Flags was like, oh, I'm having international experiences as a 16-year-old, 17-year-old, 18-year-old, right? Then I went to college to become the trilingual interpreter for the deaf, right? And in that process, I was, you know how college students be working and going to school. I couldn't have a full-time job while I was in my interpreting program because it was so tenuous and the time frames that I had, or tedious, not tedious, maybe not tenuous. It was hard. It was rigorous. There we go. It was very rigorous, and I couldn't have a full-time job during the day because I, well, was in class. So I had to take part-time opportunities around my class schedule so that I could successfully, not be homeless. Although it didn't work at a point in time where I was actually homeless, or unhoused. Back then it was homeless. Now it's unhoused. Whatever. I was working 3 jobs my whole college career. I was working 3 jobs, and they were different jobs. I started off being a tutor in Spanish first semester, freshman year. Yeah, I was the only person at my school to do that. This school right here, this blue school, I was the first person to actually be a tutor in their first semester of their freshman year. You can clap for me if you want to. If not, I don't care. I already got an award for it, right? So, yeah, I'm in college. I was tutoring. I was working at McDonald's and I was working at Hardee's. I was speaking Spanish more than I was speaking English at that point because our Spanish teacher was she was teaching the route that they teach regular. So they say full immersion is the best way to learn another language. Well, that works for some people like me who wasn't fighting the Spanish learning process because I was sleeping in class. But for people who are like, oh, I don't understand what they're saying, this is hard, blah, 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 it's harder for them to learn with the full immersion method because they're telling themselves all day that they don't understand what's happening, so they never actually understand it. So this is one of the things that made me really good at teaching Spanish is because I teach you how to be confident from the jump. I teach you how to be boldly bilingual, right? So I was working 3 jobs at my first school, got that degree, went to my second school, and I was a double major with a minor, right? So my double major was American Sign Language interpreting and Spanish, and my minor was in French. But I got to my last semester of college and I had 4 classes left and I lost financial aid because they told me I had enough credits to get my Spanish degree. So I was like, well, I only have 4 classes left. I was strategic about it. I found my loopholes of how to get 2 degrees at one time without losing financial aid. But they caught on to me and they realized I had enough credits to get the degree. And I had to turn my American Sign Language interpreting into a minor. And I'm sad about that, but maybe that was God's timing because in my American Sign Language interpreting classes, 2 big things that happened that changed my life. The first thing was my teacher said there will never be enough interpreters for the deaf to have full access to everything in our lives in this country. And the second thing that happened is I was offered a job teaching Spanish and American Sign Language, so American Sign Language and Spanish to little rich kids. And of course, they did not look like me. I had to take it. I took the interview and I loved that job. I didn't want to be a teacher. I accidentally fell in love with it. It was invigorating to come up with creative ways to teach complex ideas to kids who weren't even old enough to know the difference between a verb and a subject. So having to teach them, yes, we focus primarily first on building vocabulary and then building confidence by being able to use the vocabulary, which was a lot of vocabulary they learned because we played games. I used games that I played when I was a kid, but I also made games up on the spot, tested it with these kids on the spot, and they loved it. I thought it was an amazing experience because, well, how many people can say that they were a Black woman teaching Spanish and sign language to rich little Caucasian kids? Not many people can say that. It was a very special and unique experience, and it made me fall in love with teaching. Not just them, but teaching in general, because my teacher told me that there will never be enough interpreters for deaf people. So it changed my perspective of how I approach teaching these kids. I didn't go in there to just teach them vocabulary so that their parents can brag on them learning Spanish. I didn't go in there to teach them the grammar and about deaf culture because I wanted them to just be able to brag about it. No, I taught them so that they can be more accepting and embracing to people who don't look like them. I didn't look like them, who could be more accepting to people who communicate differently, whether it be a different language or a different mode. I wanted them to embrace people who were different and treat them with the same respect that they treat people who look like them, who have as much money as them, who are on the same level. And that's what told me, well, that's what helped me to realize that my divine purpose is in helping people become boldly bilingual at minimum. Because me becoming confident in Spanish led to me becoming confident in sign language, led to me becoming confident in French, and led to me being confident in my ability to learn more languages. So I decided I am on a mission to learn 40 languages before I turn 40 and use them as often as I possibly can to make the world a better place. That's number one. Number two, of those 40 languages, I'm learning 10 new sign languages. Well, they're not new, but I'm learning 10 sign languages, so that I can be a part of the process that helps set up a study abroad program for deaf individuals, deaf college students, deaf youth, to set up the ability for them to attend forums in their languages and being able to build community. We already have access to the whole world, or pretty much the whole world, via the internet. We have the technology to actually improve the quality of the world we leave this next generation. So why not do it? I'm doing my part. I started by believing that I was going to do stuff for me. I love to travel, of course. Learning languages makes it more fun to travel. That's a great part, a great selling feature. But the benefit of being able to feel comfortable when you travel is a lifelong benefit. And I do this because, well, multilingual kids will improve the quality of the world. If we raise up the kids in a way that will allow them to have problem solving skills, to be cognizant of the different cultural differences. Sorry, I was thinking in Spanish for a second. To be open to learning something new and being confidently wrong when they are confidently wrong. This is why I began teaching. At first, it was because I needed to make money around my school schedule, and the school allowed me to come in with a flexible schedule. But working at that school allowed me to teach over 200 kids. And that opened up the opportunity for me to go to different public and private schools after working there and teach more kids. I even worked at a school for deaf and deaf-blind kids with additional disabilities and complex communication issues. So I was able to work with deaf kids with other disabilities, because I don't view deafness as a disability. I view it as a different ability. And I think it was King Jordan who said, deaf people can do anything hearing people can do except hear. And I want to be able to make such an impact on the world, because if we start teaching these kids multiple languages as early as we possibly can, their fluency will be as equal as they speak their first language. And when they do that, they'll be comfortable making friends who don't look like them, who don't communicate like them. They'll be comfortable having conversations that solve these problems. So if you're ready to join me on a mission to help more multilingual kids improve the world, how many languages are you learning next? What are you doing next? I work with parents. I work with educators. I work with kids. I've had students who were babies. I've had students, my oldest student currently is 72 years old. And she told me, I've always wanted to learn Spanish, but I felt like I was too old to start. And she's doing great. She learned Spanish or is learning Spanish now at 72 years old. What's your excuse? Why aren't you learning another language? Maybe you need the right teacher. Maybe you need someone who will give you a personalized curriculum. Maybe you're using the apps and you're learning how to memorize those phrases, but you might need help in order to create your own thoughts. Maybe you need someone who looks like you. Whatever it is, whatever reason, excuse that you've been using, I want to help you become boldly bilingual at minimum. I no longer teach American Sign Language. I teach my kids, my husband, but I no longer teach American Sign Language because before I realized it is a version of cultural appropriation. So the deaf community has spoken up in the last few years and said that this is their language, this is their culture, and they deserve to be the ones getting paid to teach it. I'll let that be. That's fine. That's absolutely fine. They can teach their language. That's that's great. That takes something off of my plate. However, if a school does offer me a position to come in and teach, I'm going to teach just the basics enough so that the deaf kids that are these kids' ages can make new friends. A lot of deaf kids these days are mainstream. They're sent to their neighborhood schools that are closer to their families instead of sent to residential schools who may be losing funding right now with all of the federal cuts and state budget cuts and all of that, whatever. But a lot of deaf kids are and have been mainstreamed. And when they've been mainstreamed, they've been bullied. And that was one of the things that we connected on. I've been bullied. So if a deaf kid has to go to a hearing school and is getting bullied for being deaf, something they can't control, the bully should at least know sign language. Because if you're going to bully a deaf kid, you at least need to know how to bully them in their language. So if a school offers me the chance to come and teach American Sign Language there and I accept it, it's to give deaf kids full access to the communication that they need. I want to raise up a generation of people who believe that deaf people are people, not less than. They're people on the same level who need access to communication the same way we need access to communication. I believe that's the reason why all these raids have been happening and the reason why a lot of people hate people who are speaking Spanish because they don't understand and they're too lazy to take the time to. So if they're too lazy to make time to learn another language, I think it would be great if we teach their kids who already have to be in school anyway. I think deaf teachers are the best teachers for their language. I've learned from deaf teachers. That's how I started learning. When I was in college, there were more professors who were hearing than when I was before and taking those classes on the weekends. So I've had sign language classes from both deaf and hearing teachers. And I love the fact that deaf culture is always put first. They teach you about how to respect the cultures. So if a deaf kid is getting bullied, they at least should be respectfully bullied. Okay. So I never introduced myself, but my name is Natosha Long. But all my students call me Senora Inez. This isn't my TED talk. This is just practicing for it. I yeah, I am a instructor of Spanish, sign language only to education, educational establishments to make them more accessible for deaf kids. That's the only reason why. I also teach a little bit of French. I only had a few French students, but I do love that they cared to try to learn. So that's why I was like, you know what? I'll make the sacrifice and I will do it. I'll teach you. I'll make it easy for you to get started so that you can learn from a native in their language. I even, excuse me, I even teach English to Spanish speakers. I fell in love with teaching and now I teach my kids, not just the languages, of course, but I'm a world schooling parent. That's homeschool all over the world because if I'm gonna learn 40 languages, I'm gonna have to go see the world. So I might as well go see the world with my kids. After all, traveling is way more affordable when all the traditional schools are in session. I could take my kids somewhere on a Wednesday because it's Wednesday and all the other kids are in school. They might get little field trips here and there and go cool places in our local area. The kind of field trips I'm setting up for my kids, they might last a month long, 2 months, 3 months, a whole year in different places, seeing things, learning, connecting, building community, building community with people who look like them but don't speak English. Just this year alone, I led my first homeschool, well, actual, this year alone, I led my first world school study abroad trip in Costa Rica for a whole month. We were in Costa Rica, and it was a wonderful educational experience for those world schooling students, but for me too, because I'm a lifelong learner. Are you?